What's up, everybody? Happy holidays. Hope that your holiday is treating you well and you're ready to relax. As you listen to this episode of the Coast to Coast podcast from InsideCarolina.com, brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. All right, thanks for being here, everybody. I'm Joey Powell, your host. This is the Coast to Coast podcast for InsideCarolina.com. And joining me, as always, the two guys that bring the heat, that bring the noise, that have the insight that you crave, Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan. Sean, how are you, dude?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Man, I was a lot better 2 hours ago. Sherrell, how are you?
Yeah, it was a lot better before a pick six in overtime to end the game, but I'm okay now.
I'm not okay, so maybe I'll get there in a few hours. Something that is okay. Tar Heel basketball getting a win against a Q1 opponent, or at least they should be a Q1. They were ranked when the Tar Heels played them. I do think this Ohio State team is good, but they beat a Citadel team earlier this week too. Beat them handily. Had a lot of good things to take away from that, and we're now talking about a three-game win streak after a four-game losing streak. So, guys, Sherrill, I'll come to you first. What was new about these two games for the Tar Heels?
I think Ohio State is the most recent in our minds. I think what was new about that was kind of old, in that it's the first time. And I hate to keep comparing stuff to last year. We're 12 games in now. It was the first time you saw them kind of recreate some of that magic. Just big play after big play. Even down 14 when it didn't look good, and some of us were writing, the obituary on the season, uh, myself included. They found a way to get back in the game. I think the concerning thing still is, all last year we talked about variance, and I think it's still there this year, in that, the first 5 minutes of the first half, they're up 13-8, they're looking pretty good. And then the huge Ohio State run, and, back down the roller coaster. And then they come out the second half with their hair on fire, up the roller coaster, get within one, and then slowly, Ohio State takes it back up to 11 at one point. So I think still kind of the roller coaster thing is something that has to be worked out. But you have to give them a ton of credit for pulling that win out, all things considered, because they looked finished, they looked done, and that was really their last chance to get a high caliber win for some time, a realistic chance to get a high caliber win for some time.
Yeah, and I guess the taking that a step further, if they had not gotten that win and had lost the game against Ohio State, at that point you're wondering, like, is this team actually going to miss the tournament? Is this team actually looking at the same dire scenario that they were looking at in late February last year? Sean, what was your takeaway from that Ohio State game, aside of just seeing a team kind of show some fight and show some moxie? What jumped out at you about that win? And if you want to kind of pair it with the Citadel game, feel free.
Sure. Well, definitely a lot jumped out. I think the main thing was mental toughness. There were probably many times they could have folded it in.
Yeah.
In the first half, start of the second half, when when they cut it to 1 point right off the bat, and then it balloons up, similar to the Virginia Tech game where they cut it to three, and all of a sudden it's seven, and they couldn't come back from that with a few minutes left. But this one, they just kept pushing. I mean, even at the 8 minute mark, right before UNC went to the full court press, it felt pretty challenging, given that anytime UNC would hit a few baskets, Ohio State would match them. And then, to be able to get to overtime, be able to take the lead in overtime and finish it out at the end, I think showed a mental toughness that we probably hadn't seen in a while. Uh, the other two things, Armando Bacot, just in terms of how well he has been playing, really from the Georgia Tech game. But even in the Georgia Tech game, it still didn't feel like he was as explosive as he had been last year. And obviously he's dealing with his shoulder problem right now. But the last two games, I felt he looked really good and really crisp, just running the floor, and just being back to, the ACC Player of the Year that we thought he would be. And then third thing, you know, they put it on the broadcast, but something we've been talking about is the assist to field goals made.
Hmm.
That the last two games, the team has been sharing the ball, moving the ball crisply. There have been a few forced shots, but within that, there's still been a lot more ball movement and a lot more playing together than we had seen over that 5 game Portland and Indiana Virginia Tech stretch. So those are probably the top three for me.
Yeah, Sherrill.
I was gonna a couple of things to add. I think another thing I liked about it was that everyone who played had some kind of meaningful contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the big three, Caleb, RJ, and Baycott did the lion's share of the scoring. Um, they each kind of had a stretch there where they kept UNC in it or pushed UNC forward. But then, obviously Pete Nance hits the biggest shot of the game to send it in overtime. And then maybe Leaky Black hits the second biggest shot of the game,
Mm-hmm.
that three, to cut it to one. And, I think everybody was kind of like, oh no, what is he doing? And I think we've fallen back to that, even though he's still shooting a great percentage. So he had impactful plays. Puff Johnson had a few impactful plays. So I think it was one of those team wins. And then the other thing for everyone who thinks we're being dramatic by saying it was a season saver or it was something that North Carolina, really needed to win, got a
Mm-hmm.
text from exchanging text with someone close to the program, and I was like, hey, awesome, good stuff, and they were like, had to have it, and that's coming from someone close to the program.
Yeah.
So that's not a situation where we're exaggerating the importance of that win on Saturday. It really could change the tenor of the season tremendously. Obviously, they have to continue to build on it and validate it. But for now, it's a huge feather in their cap to move forward. And I think confidence wise, it could help a ton too.
Agree. I don't think you can understate the way that they came back and won that game yesterday. Sean, I want to follow something you said there a second ago. You talked about Armando Baycott, and I think that's been kind of the biggest aha, pardon the pun, but I want to share a tweet from our guy Brian Ives. He is at Away to Worthy on Twitter. Away to Worthy, the famous call by Woody Durham in the '82 championship game. At Brian Ives or Brian Ives at Away to Worthy on Twitter. He shared this last night, and I love this stat. Armando Baycott took 16% of North Carolina's shots in his first 8 games of the season. Armando took 23% of North Carolina's shots in the last 3 games of the season. I think that kind of gets to what you're getting at, Sean, about just how when they start running more things through Armando, and keep in mind against Ohio State, his first field goal didn't come until like 8 minutes to 8 minutes were gone in the game. I believe was the first time he scratched, or it may have been the actual 8 minute mark. And still he finished with the strong box score that he did. Sean, is there a way that North Carolina can continue to stress him or stress him being a part of the offense? And if so, is there a way they can do it without forcing entry passes? Because we still saw some forced entry passes against Ohio State, but I think they've done a lot better about focusing on him. How do you think they can continue to do that?
Yeah, he took 19 shots, which is actually wasn't the highest on the team, but we know the guards are going to get their shots up, and I think what we saw in the losing streak was it was focused on the guards, and there wasn't the inside out. It was outside. That was the focus. So I know starting with the Georgia Tech game, a little bit of the focus on running the floor, but also getting the bigs the ball early and working inside out. With 19 shots, I still thought there were plenty of opportunities in that second half, kind of that last 8 minutes where they could have gone to him, just given not the ease, because everything he was doing was difficult, but with the height advantage he had on Zed Key, he was having his way down there, and towards the end you could see almost the defeated look that they would have anytime Armando dominated them down low. And I think there were some opportunities to get better shots, but I think going forward, also when he did get the ball, he was looking to pass if they're bringing double teams, and that led to some open shots. So I think once again that's going to lead to better shots for the guards, and hopefully higher percentage shots, but also continuing to look to cut for guys like Leaky and others. So you have a guy that for the most part is not going to be guarded one-on-one, save for a few teams and a few defenders, and he's going to put pressure on the defense. So I think he needs to continue having that increased shot percentage, and he will continue to need to have either the most shot attempts per game or right up there, just given what he can do down low, and hopefully how he's feeling as well right now.
Sherrell, I want to ask you. I saw something in the Georgia Tech and Citadel games that I think really helped the team against Ohio State, and that was Hubert Davis's use of the bench. I think we've been pleading for more of that. We finally did see Jalen Washington make appearance against Georgia Tech, and we saw a really deep rotation against the Citadel this past week. But specifically, I think not just bench contributions, but the bench being able to play minutes in the first half allowed Hubert Davis to lean on his guys in the second half and kind of go back to that iron five for the second half and the overtime. Give us a little bit of an explanation about why that matters now in December.
Yeah, it looked very Roy Williams-ish yesterday in the substitution, which is very Coach Smithian in the substitution patterns. I think there's a misconception that Roy Williams, only played people 25 minutes a game, his starters, and that the bench guys got a whole bunch of time. Yeah, in the first half they usually did, and the goal of that was to, like you said, to keep his players fresh in the second half, so that they could play those extended minutes. I remember so many games where Ty Lawson or Ray Felton or Wayne Ellington would play maybe 12 or 13 minutes in the first half, and you're kind of wondering like what's going on? Are you trying to win? And then they play 19 in the second half, and the other team is a lot more tired, a lot more fatigued, whereas Carolina's guys were a little fresher. And if you're going to go with this Iron Five light concept, which it seems like UNC is going to need to, if you look at some of the numbers when there's one or two or three bench players on the court, then at least you have to buy some time in the first half to get those guys more rest than you did last year. And that's what happened, I think, with Puff and with Trimble and Tyler Nickel to some extent. Just enough minutes just to give them, the starters, a breather, a break for a second, a chance to just slow down, to get some Gatorade and just relax for a second, maybe even over the course of a TV timeout. So you have the kind of real time versus on court time rest. So I think that was huge and really important because like Caleb ended up playing 42 minutes and just those 3 minutes might have been enough for, a couple of those passes or a couple of the free throws that he hit towards the end of the game and in overtime. So I think it's a big deal. I do think you kind of have to come to grips with the fact that there's never going to be a situation again where, it's 25 minutes for the starters and 15 minutes for a few subs, and they're going 9 and 10 deep. I just don't think Hubert Davis is wired that way, and I don't think we'll see that at UNC at least this season. So 35 minutes for the starters, spot minutes for the guys who come off the bench and hope that they are not a net negative while they're on the court. But yeah, it's more than he used it last year, so I think that's progress.
Sean, I want to kind of drive into that a little bit further. When I saw this in real time in the Ohio State game, I was like, all right, this is something we definitely want to talk to Sean about. One of the things I think Hubert Davis did in the second half of that game is as Ohio State was getting tired, and you could see those guys were gassed. I don't think I'm being partial when I say that Ohio State's starting five looked gassed towards the end of regulation and into overtime. I saw Hubert Davis draw up a couple of plays where he was essentially isolating two players in RJ Davis and Armando Bacot and overloading the other side just to play a little 2-on-2 game with them. He went to that 3 times, maybe more. I haven't rewatched it yet. Is that something we could expect to see? Because we know he's got a penchant for doing things over and over again until you stop it. But that to me seemed like a coach trying to use the other team's tired legs against him. Is that what's happening, or do you think that could happen more often, or is it just Hubert Davis just a different guy?
Yeah, well, we'll wait until Trevor Marks does his breakdown this week, but you could see on the TV, it looked like he was calling 2-5 or 25 floppy was what it looked like he was mouthing, and they continued to run that on the right side, which resulted in RJ making a very decisive move from the right wing where he attacked the basket, got the layup, and then coming back hit that huge three that he did. So I think you saw that. You saw some other plays coming from the sideline out of bounds, etc. So offensively, yeah, I mean, I think he has been, going back to the Alabama game, there have been a lot of plays run, whether or not they were run correctly or got to, different actions is another thing. But I think in general, it seemed everybody was so locked in. The Madison Square Garden crowd was electric, and it seemed everybody was focused, which we had talked about, coming into some of these past few games, and with some of those calls, or looking at Caleb to get him a three, almost reminiscent of UCLA from that right corner as well. I think were some things that were evident as you're watching, but also I think there are probably things evident that we didn't see that they were trying to do early on. But now when you have guys clicking, and I think that also goes back to the Citadel game, that they were able to take their starters out with 7 or 8 minutes left, if I'm remembering correctly, which going back to last year has rarely happened because they need the starters to be playing to
Yeah.
the final minutes. And I think just that Citadel game helped tremendously in terms of getting everybody confident, and getting everybody confident in what others can do. So it doesn't all have to be, a 1-on-5 mentality. And then one thing to add defensively, and it didn't work because it gave up 5 points on 2 possessions, but once in the first half, once in the second half, Armando Bacot coming out of really a pick and roll,
Off
blitz
the hedge.
blitz the point guard. First time I thought it was a travel offensively, but led to an open three, and then second time got around him. But I did like the aggressiveness, and it definitely surprised the ball handler both times. So I'd love to see a little bit more of that, just given UNC isn't known for doing that really at all. So I think continuing to implement some of those surprises on both offensively and defensively. And when they did do the trap, it was after the 8-minute timeout. So there was going to be a long stretch where, unless Ohio State utilized one of their timeouts, they were going to be going for a few minutes, almost reminiscent of some other things we've seen in the past where it comes after halftime or comes after a timeout. So that was long-winded, but offensively, defensively, I think you saw Hubert Davis looking to shake things up and try to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, you mentioned the Madison Square Garden kind of feel, and that's definitely an NBA arena. It's the mecca. It's the home of basketball. There was a lot of Tar Heel fans there yesterday, and I want to give a shout out to anybody who's listened to this who made that trek and was there. Hey, you guys were loud. You guys were into it. That environment, at least from TV, sounded really amazing. And the fact that there were so many Carolina fans there tells me that there was a lot of Johnny T-shirt gear there. I would bet dollars to Strudel that there was, at least 20% of the Carolina gear in there came from Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com. Listen, we got like 6 shopping days left until Christmas. You've still got time. Hit Johnny T-shirt up. If they can't get it to you with their regular shipping, you can expedite it, pay that little extra, still have it at your house, get it wrapped, all that good stuff. Or better yet, swing by the store on East Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. They'll take care of you. They love Inside Carolina. They love you guys who are Inside Carolina subscribers and listeners and viewers. So give them some love. Let them help you out with the shopping for the Tar Heel in your life. I promise you, you'll be very glad that you did so. Take a quick break, let the national guys drop some ads in here. We're going to come right back, talk a little bit more about execution on the Coast to Coast podcast. I'm Joey Powell, Sherrell, McMillan, Sean Moran with me. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for sticking around. Coast to Coast podcast coming at you. Latest edition, Tar Heels, winners in overtime, 89-84 over Ohio State. That's our first Q1 win of the year. We just got done talking about kind of the way Hubert Davis is throwing some in-game changes and calling some things that Tar Heel fans may not have seen before, but it's actually working to this team's advantage. I think it's more about his style. Sherrell, this is not me bad-mouthing Roy Williams. All right. I want to get that out in the ether and make sure everybody can get that on the record. But I saw Hubert Davis call plays at the end of regulation yesterday that I don't think Tar Heel fans have ever seen executed that well in a long time. So I want to come to you, sir, and have you elaborate a little bit on what it means to have a guy that's X's and O's and can look at Jeff Lebo and say, hey, draw something up, right? And have it work and have the guys execute it. What does that mean for a team in December?
Well, it's experience. It's knowing that you have been in a situation before, and that you were able to overcome it. I think ideally they would not go to a play that they had never practiced before, in a perfect world, but that's the way it worked out on Saturday. I think the difference between sets and plays. I think a lot of people are confused about that. Obviously, Roy Williams didn't call a ton of plays. He had a lot of sets, and there's a lot of freelance that looked like plays because they're so familiar because we saw them over and over again, but they weren't set plays. I think that is more of a new age kind of modern thing to have a coach actually call plays, especially in North Carolina. Hubert Davis using that NBA background. That happens a lot in the NBA. So I don't want to say it's better. It's just different. And the execution, you can definitely see it. You can tell outside of the most important play of the game, you can tell that stuff has been drilled over and over and over again. And I think it shows a willingness on Hubert Davis's part, one, to trust his staff. Brad Frederick, Sean May, Jeff Lebo, to integrate some of the things that they see. I watched the excuse me, I watched the Penn State Clemson game that Lebo said he was watching for a different reason, but I watched it, and a phenomenal play that the coach at Micah, the coach at Penn State, drew up. And if you read Matt Norlander's piece, you kind of get the history of the play. It goes all the way back to Butler in Boston, because there's a Brad Stevens connection. At any rate, the point of that is that you see them integrating and just taking in all of these new things from different places. And again, this is not a slight on Roy Williams, but when you win, 75, 76% of your games, there's really no need to take in anything from other places. But the willingness to expand, to try new things, I think bodes well for UNC, for Hubert Davis. And you'll see them try stuff that they see in the NBA, they see, in the Australian League, and that they see from other teams. And that's cool.
It's absolutely cool. That's a great way to put it. And I'll be honest, I hated the last play. I thought like I didn't like the idea of running a skip pass, which is very Dean Smith-esque, but I didn't like the idea of running that kind of skip pass across the court for a guy to catch it and hit a turnaround. But it worked, right?
If you look at the post game, and that's the other thing. Sorry to jump in, but
Sure.
if you listen to the post game, Leaky Black and Armando Bacot both were like, this ain't gonna work. And they were kind of in their mind already planning on something when it didn't work. But now that they saw that it worked, that just builds more trust in the coaching staff and more camaraderie and more belief. So it's definitely a good thing. But I'm with you. I was kind of like, that's an interesting call.
It's so much cred for that staff. Go ahead, Sean.
I was gonna say I did love the call, and I feel like Roy Williams used to do this a lot, and I'm always surprised it doesn't happen more in college, but trying to get the ball to half court instead of throwing the ball inbounds and getting the ball, getting the guy on the run and trying to take a 40-foot leaner. So that was, and from TV you couldn't really see what was going on in the other half. All of a sudden you just saw RJ emerge, take a dribble, call a timeout. But and even when Ohio State made the basket, it looked like Armando was ready to throw it into Caleb and RJ, who were standing right there before everybody started calling timeout. So that, those two setup plays to get to the Pete Nance fadeaway jump shot also, were extremely, extremely important.
And in defense of Roy Williams, why were they able to do that?
Because they're so used to getting the ball out of the net and getting it up the court as quick as possible.
And because they didn't waste timeouts the rest of the game.
Right. Well, I'd love. I mean, I'm guessing right now Roy Williams is still on a ninth green somewhere calling timeouts just because he's got so many stashed up. But Sean, something that I don't think folks can downplay is the amount of execution that goes into being able to get the ball to half court and get that timeout. Like RJ Davis said in the post game, he had to have his heels down in the forecourt, or they don't get to take the ball out right there. And that's stuff that, like Sherrell said, it comes as the season goes on. All right, I'm gonna let both of you guys answer this question before we look at Michigan and get out of here. I saw folks on social media during the game just again ripping Caleb Love's shot selection. And okay, I get it. I feel like people don't like shots when he misses them. But I'm a firm believer that Caleb Love is Caleb Love, and you can't get the shot over Mark Williams without getting some of the quick, ill-advised shots. What I have seen is a player that has improved his game distributing the ball. Sherrell, what are your thoughts and feelings about Caleb Love so far this year as we sit in late December?
Yeah, it's been hit or miss. And I think you're starting to see a more well-rounded Caleb Love, especially these last 3 games as UNC has kind of refined how it plays and gone back to trusting that Armando Bacot needs to be the focal point of the offense. You've seen him do a lot more dishing and driving. I think is a good thing. You've seen him, while he took 13 threes on Saturday, there were probably 3 or 4. I was just kind of like, what are you doing? But
he was the only one making them.
Yeah, he was the only one making them. But the other 8, if he was shooting, 8 or 9, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. 13 might be a little high. You might want to see him drive a little bit more, but he's doing that more than he did last year, driving to the rim. And now it's at the point where you could just play him to drive to score because he wasn't going to pass. I think now in teams' mind they have to sag off a little bit because he is making some of those passes. The behind the back one, it worked, so that's good. Maybe not the best play in the world, but it worked. And a couple of others were just really, really great plays. I think the one in the second half to cut it to one to Armando Bacot, that is a skillful play. Let's put it that way. Driving over, around two defenders with his left hand, finding Bacot. So I said all that to say I think he's coming around to being a more complete player.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't quite have the scoring explosions that we had last year, but I think that's not necessarily what North Carolina needs this year because it needs to be Armando Bacot focused every single game. Bacot he had 19 shots, and I'm like, should have had about 25 or 26 if we're being honest, because they couldn't stop him. So just a concerted effort to get the ball to Bacot, and loves doing that. And we have to give him credit. We as a basketball community are always down on him for his assist numbers and his turnover numbers, but 7-2 yesterday is impressive. So props to him.
Sherrell, Sean, do you know who's leading UNC in assists right now this season?
I'm gonna go with Caleb Love on how you phrase that question.
You're a sharp man, Sean. You've come to know me in my heart so well. He's got 45. The second place person is RJ Davis with 35. And so again, like I to Sherrell's point, it's so much more rail-wounded. Get it? Rail-wounded?
Oh, that's
Sherrell?
yeah, I get it. He's at 5 a game. That's more than I expected.
Again, and that's where where people want to bag on him. Sean, your thoughts on Caleb Love, man?
Yeah, well, staying on the passing note, last 3 games, 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio with 18 assists. So I think you've seen coming that break that they had after the losing streak, and a new focus. Hopefully that can continue. Once again, I think we're all pretty excited now about the comeback win, but if they lose to Michigan, they at least have that Q1 win, but they need to still beat Michigan to kind of continue the momentum. But for Caleb, he was 1 for 6 in the first half, and they weren't going to come back unless he started playing well, and he did turn it around defensively. I thought he had a very strong game defensively. Ohio State wasn't they set a lot of ball screens, but it was easier to get through them. And we talked about teams targeting Caleb in the past, but he was, I thought, very strong on ball against Ohio State and played with a lot of energy throughout. And then, just going back offensively, the 1 for 6, he finished 8 for 20. To Sherrell's point, I counted 3 threes that he probably could have done without, one being from the CBS Sports logo, the other where I wouldn't really call him getting dunked on because he was a little late on the help, and it wasn't like he fully went for the block, but you could see the trash talking going on, and you knew Caleb was going to launch, even though him and Sensabaugh weren't guarding. So, once again, I think a little bit of an improvement in the shot selection, a reduction of those deep NBA threes, but he has been playing a lot better. And even 2 of the shots he missed where he attacked the basket, you saw the explosiveness in the first step that you haven't, each year has gotten a little bit better in terms of that ability to directly attack the rim. And I think the first one, it looked like he was going to try to throw it down, and he just altered his body in midair to try to adjust. But, he was a big reason that they came back in the second half and hit some big shots. And I think Caleb, along with the team, played very well, but there's still, say they're at 80%, there's still that 20% that they can continue to improve on and reach that full potential.
All right. Before we get out of here, Sean, this is my Christmas present to you, sir. I'm going to allow you to talk about Michigan basketball. The Tar Heels will be playing the Wolverines in the Spectrum Center in Charlotte on Wednesday night at 7:00. Sean, what can we expect? I know Michigan's lost 3 games. 2 of them were to ranked teams. They lost by a bucket to UVA, by 4 to UK, but got their doors blown off at Arizona State. Sean, get us ready for the thrill that is more Big Ten basketball against Michigan Wednesday night.
Well, they played Michigan at home last year. Obviously, Hunter Dickinson is, that's going to be a battle. Last year, I know Michigan fans weren't pleased with the foul trouble that he got in, so it wasn't a true team takeover battle with Dickinson and Armando going at it. So I'd have to imagine we see more of that. When they did lose to UVA, it was kind of the two sides of Michigan. They put up 45 points in the first half against UVA, which doesn't happen doesn't really happen that often. And they were hitting, playing very well. And then the second half, they were held to 23, and they definitely came back down to earth. I think Hunter Dickinson, obviously the main piece that gets them going, but I've been impressed by Jet Howard, Jawan's son. 6'6", 6'7" wing, so I would expect to see Leaky on him and looking to make his life tough. And then they have a few other players, one being a guy that everybody's vastly familiar with in Joey Baker, who's been playing well, off the bench.
Yeah.
So
13 minutes a game, Sean. 13 minutes. That's a lot of time compared to what he was seeing in Durham.
Yeah, saying that's probably 10 more minutes than he was seeing last year. But in terms of Michigan, similar profile to Ohio State, not as strong offensively, but a top 25 offensively, number 91 defensively on KenPom. So once again, a team that UNC, this is a team would love to see in the tournament, where it'll probably be a little bit more up and down, a little bit more free flowing, less bumping and grinding, which, we saw in the Indiana and Iowa State game. So, UNC has a good chance here to make it 2 in a row against Big Ten teams and get another much needed win, going into the ACC play. But last thing I'll say, they have to control Hunter Dickinson and, make just kind of push Michigan off the 3-point line from getting open threes and force them to drive and take contested shots.
Well, I know nothing would make you happier than to see 2 back-to-back Big Ten losses against North Carolina. Sherrell, before we get out of here, I know folks are asking because the Tar Heels just played in New York and there's some recruiting ties to New York. So why don't you give us a little bit of a recruiting note? I know that Isle of Palms just took place this past weekend. What can you tell us about UNC recruiting right now?
Before I do that, I just want to see Terrence Williams, Pete Nance. That's the matchup I'm interested in because that's a tough cover for Pete Nance. Recruiting wise, so UNC obviously was in New York for a few days. I think they got there Wednesday night, Thursday morning. And Isaiah Harwell, who's a 2025 guard, plays out in Utah. His team actually was in Brooklyn in a tournament, and I believe UNC went out to see him on Friday night. Jeff Lebo, we know, stopped by Christ the King Cardinal Hayes to see Ian Jackson, who's scheduled to officially visit UNC in about 3 weeks. So he's a 2024 guard, but there's a chance that he could reclassify as well. So they're keeping tabs on them. And then we confirmed that Lebo flew down to City of Palms, I think like right after the game or earlier today. Elliot Cadeau and Boogie Flan both played today. Stepanak, where Boogie Flan goes, they won on Friday. They lost today. Link Prep won today. I think Cadeau had 15 points, 9 or 10 assists.
One turnover.
One turnover, yeah. I watched him last week too, just trying to get more familiar with his game. Same thing with Boogie. And because we have a lot of these kids we haven't seen play since late July, early August. And Cadeau he's just a really smooth, kind of in control, calm point guard. And I think his assist to turnover numbers kind of show that. Boogie, just his skill level, his scoring level, ability to score kind of jumps off whenever you watch him. So it's been fun to kind of get back into it and watch a lot of these guys play. They both have games. I think they both have games on Tuesday, I believe. So I'm sure the UNC staff will maybe be around for tonight and maybe Monday. Additionally, a local note: Charlotte, Myers Park High School out of Charlotte is down there playing well. They won their first game, and they have a roster full of D1 players. I think one of the ones that's most interesting is Sadiq White. He's a 2025 guard/forward. Had a big game on a national stage. I think 15 points, 10 rebounds, and like 5 blocks. Was it yesterday or today? Either yesterday or today. But kind of a coming out party for him. And we know Jeff Lebo has been down to Charlotte to see him before. So just a few notes on those guys. And the John Wall Invitational will kick off in a couple weeks. The Chick-fil-A Classic will kick off in a couple of weeks. And we'll be monitoring all of those and be at a couple of them.
And I'm sure if there is news to be shared, the man in the red shirt, as you see this on YouTube, will have it for you. Guys, anything else you want to add before you get out of here? Sean, I know you've got to go deck the halls, man. You got 2 cents for us, or you good to go?
The only thing I'll add is the bench play. I think they're going to continue to improve, especially the young guys, in terms of just figuring out what their really good at and expanding their roles. We know Trimble's a great on-ball defender. Still waiting for him to, showcase some of his his finishing ability at the rim. And then Tyler Nickel obviously played great against Citadel. Misses 2 threes, but love how quickly he's either looking to get a shot up or move the ball or attack. And then defensively had that, the block that was pretty impressive. Even though he got scored on by Suing a few times, there were tough shots that he hit, and Nickel, there wasn't really anything Nickel could have done more on those. So looking forward to seeing him continue to improve and give the Tar Heels a little spark off the bench.
Sherrell, you got a couple pennies you want to throw at us on the way out the door?
Yeah, one's very serious, one's not. So the first one, to Sean's point, I feel like a lot of Ohio State shots were just tough shots. There weren't many where they were just wide open or North Carolina was filling about. There were a few of those, but it felt like they just made a bunch of shots. So I'd love to see when Adrian reviews the film, just what his numbers say about UNC's defense. Secondly, kind of a heavy note, but I think sports and basketball always brings us together. So Brett Thompson, who's a former IC intern, lost his father on Friday. Had a battle with some stuff, and just let him know we're thinking about him. And then personally, two close friends, Jonathan and Chris Peel, lost their mother also on Friday. All these guys are huge Carolina fans, and it was interesting to text with them and talk with them on Saturday after the win. Just how something is trivial sports can lift moods and spirits in dire times. So just wanted to give them a shout out. And it's a good reminder for me personally that while this is very important, it's not very important.
Well, what is very important is I think, all of those guys are certainly in our thoughts. Yeah, if you'd like to send messages to those dudes, if you know them, send them up. But I think it's also cool to hear somebody like Brett talk about how much he and his dad bonded over sports. So to that end, I'm glad you mentioned those guys. Definitely want to say we're thinking about them. And all I would say to everybody is, especially this time of season, but all the time, check on your people. Make sure everybody's okay. Let them know you love them. If you get a chance, hug on them. Tell them how much you appreciate them. And if you get a chance to bond over Tar Heel sports, then please do. And if it's not, then find something else you can bond with, because we only got one trip around this life. So make what you can out of it. But I'm going to get out here on a positive note tonight. Hope you guys all have really good holiday seasons. I hope you get everything you want. I hope you're around everybody you want to be around, and I hope that you can make some meaning out of this season with those that you care about. Sherrell, Sean, appreciate you guys. Appreciate what you do for this show. Appreciate all that you bring to the show, because you carry my sorry ass around all the time. So I'm thankful for you. And for those listening and viewing, we appreciate you being a part of this family. Appreciate you being a part of our little network and our little universe that we have here on the Coast to Coast podcast. Thank you for listening. Best wishes to all of you for the holiday. We'll talk to you sometime very soon on the next edition of the Coast to Coast podcast. For Sherrell McMillan, for Sean Moran, shout out to John Siegley for producing, and to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring. I'm Joey Powell. Y'all have a good holiday season. Catch you next time. Late.